You're listening to Good Question, a podcast for the curious by Compassion Christian Church. I'm Blair Bauman, the Compassion Online Director. So glad that you joined us. We are going to be talking with Marcus Johnson, our Executive Pastor of Campus Development, and Roxi Lane, a graphic designer here. Excited to touch base with them because we know you guys are really, really busy these days. There's all kinds of things competing for your attention, for your time. Not to mention, we're walking into the holiday season. So, hey, we want to tackle this topic together, figure out how we can navigate some of the tension of our schedules and how to manage them wisely and honor the Lord through them. So join us with love and curiosity in your heart as we discuss busyness together. Marcus and Roxi, thank you for being here. You guys might not know this, but Roxi actually helps us behind the scenes a lot of times, but we're bringing her out. Marcus joining us back again. There we go. Start it with a song, okay?
This is my walk-up song.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That's a good question. What would be your walk-up song?
Oh, it's not appropriate for, I don't know. All my favorite athletes would always walk out to something like Metallica or something like that. So I feel like, but it sounds like an odd thing to play thrash metal before a busyness, podcast. Did I just give up the topic?
You did it. We're good.
Okay,
We're good.
all right,
Everything is good. You guys, I'm excited to have you because I think the topic today we're talking about, thank you for setting us up, is busyness. Problem. How do we control our calendar? How do we keep track of all that life is happening? And I think the interesting thing is all three of us will have different perspectives on busyness, but we'll get into that. I want to start off with talking about the idea that we live in a culture where people are very busy these days. Do you guys think it's because we actually are busier, or do you think it's because we assume we're busy, or we just like to say we're busy because it makes us look like we're doing a lot of things and we're really important?
Could I say yes and? Maybe?
Well, I know the answer for me.
You go ahead.
So my answer is my favorite thing to be recognized as being was busy. Mm-hmm. And people used to ask me all the time, especially when I was like a campus pastor. So my role in the church has changed over time, but as a campus pastor, you're always at the campus. People are asking how you're doing, stuff like that. Good, busy. And I started to see it in the mirror of just going like, man, I like it when people go like, oh yeah, man, I'm sure you are busy. I mean, you must be doing so much, and then it's like, yeah, I am doing so much, that's right. And it was this badge of honor. Like, I'm tired, recognize how important I am. And so I for me, I had to realize like my busyness was a choice. And my communication of my busyness wasn't even was a whole other choice. Yeah. They're disconnected from each other, but the communication of it was like a recognize my importance. Yeah, which I had to confess and get rid of that is what I had to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, I think there's a big difference in busyness and hurry. And so I used to like that I was in that hurried state of like, oh, she must be doing so much. Like, she's handling it so well. But I guess now whenever I tell people I'm busy, because in all honesty, I like to be busy. I like to always be doing things. It's more of like, I'm busy, but I like it that way. Now I have to make sure I don't pass a line, that there's a line between busy and burnout.
Yeah.
And I have to manage the tension of that line. But I used to be unhealthily busy, and now I think there's got to be margin even in the business.
Yeah,
so.
That's fair. I do think though, there are a lot of contributing factors these days to busyness that even if you try really hard, it's easy to get caught up in it. I mean, we now, opposed to years ago, have texting, we have emails, we have a way for somebody to reach us at every moment of every day. We cannot be unavailable. And we also live in a society where it's like, not only can you just have a job, but you need to be in the PTA, you need to do this extracurricular, you've got to make sure that you're volunteering somewhere and doing this. Like, have we built ourselves to be busy?
I feel like it. I mean, I think I'm going to show my age in my current company, but like there was. I am old enough to remember that there were times where you were forced repeatedly to just be like alone with yourself with nothing to do. And that doesn't even exist anymore. Like, the old version of this would be things like sitting in the DMV or sitting in a doctor's office or, there's reasons there's magazines there. It used to be that's what you had to do if you wanted to entertain yourself, and I don't know why they're paying for the subscriptions anymore. It makes no sense to me. But like there were times where you were kind of forced to do that. And it's weird to think that I got a Facebook account in college back when Facebook was only for college students.
Yeah.
And since then, it is what it is. But like we have absolutely created like a culture of you never have to stop doing something. When it used to be, you had to know how to handle the moments where you weren't going to have anything to do and just kind of deal with that. And I don't think that we have to do that anymore. But I do think there's an unintended version of that, which is there is a sense of we're like sharks. We're always moving, and we don't feel comfortable when we stop. It feels wrong.
I feel like exposed. Like if I am just like, if somebody catches me just sitting there, I like all of a sudden will feel like exposed in a sense of like, oh no, they don't think I have something to do or I don't have purpose because I'm not doing anything. But I actually like one of my favorite things to do is like sometimes I will just sit in silence. And I think it's because my brain is always moving that when I give myself a chance to be in the silence, I'm like, okay, I can breathe. But I can't do that in public because if people see, what is she doing? She's lazy.
Yeah. That is exactly what I'd think about you. If I caught you just sitting in your office, I'd be like,
she doesn't do it. We pay her to do it.
Exactly. Cut her salary immediately. I caught her not doing anything.
This is taking a weird turn, you guys. I'm not down with this.
Should we do that? Let's talk about that later, Roxi.
Oh, okay. I don't like where this is going. But let's talk about, we've already kind of hinted in this idea, but is busyness a good or a bad thing? Is it easy to categorize it?
Well, Roxi, you said that you thought I want to hear your difference between busyness and hurry.
Yeah. I think hurry is how you go about it. And so I know there was a season where we talked about this book all the time, and I'm going to bring it up. But The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, my huddle group went through it earlier this year.
It's the best.
And at first when I started reading it, I was like, it just wants me to not get stuff done, and I'm offended by that. Like I was like, I don't actually want to read this book. Thank you for suggesting it, Sean, my small group leader. But yeah, I'm offended by this. And then I had to humble myself and be like, hey, what could I actually learn? And I think when we're hurried, we lose the ability to like love others well around us. So example, I ended up seeing it in my life of, hey, I'm ready to go to the movie. And one of my friends was with me and she's like, hey, I'm not feeling very well right now. Like I feel kind of sick. Well, we have to hurry up because the movie's about to start and we're going to be late if we don't get there right now. So we'll talk about it in the car. And in that moment, I failed to love her well because I was hurried. And so I think we can be busy and have a lot of things to do, but choose to intentionally like spend our time in that, if that makes sense. So because I guess in my life, I like to remain busy. So if I'm in a doctor's office waiting somewhere or at the DMV, I try like not to be on my phone intentionally so that like if I can talk to somebody, then I will, because I'll talk to a wall if, to be honest. But like creating margin of areas within busyness that you can slow down.
Yeah.
And like breathe.
Being intentional in your busyness.
Yes. Or, putting on the do not disturb I'm driving when I'm driving and using that time to be like, hey, I can have this moment of basically solitude because I'm here by myself. And choosing to have pockets of that within busyness.
It's good.
Yeah. So same book. It's, but there's the other side of it is like hurry or busyness. There is also a like there's a reality of our need for rest. That's just there's an aspect of the fact that there's no there rarely seems to be any limiting factor in our lives. And so one of my favorite lines that really hit me from that book is this idea of so the biblical version of, or one of the things in the Bible that kind of talks about rest is this concept of Sabbath, a day where you set aside all of that stuff and rest, delight in God. The author of the book says that Sabbath is coming for you one way or another. You can either choose it, you can choose rest, or like you will ultimately break down. Like, it's not a question of like how strong you are or resilient you are or how good of a worker you are or, the grit that you have. Like at some point you will just break down if you don't intentionally choose rest. Sabbath is coming for you one way or another. And so there's that hurried version, and there's that busy version, but both of them, if either version of that involves you never stopping, then God will put you in a place of rest at some point, one way or another.
Yeah.
And that sounded like a threat, like not necessarily death, but those of us who have experienced like a mental breakdown or like a, this thing of going like, man, I can't do it. I have to stop.
Right.
And now I'm dropping things that are important. It's because there are actual limits to what we can do.
I think that's such a good point though, because like you talked about it earlier, this idea of like, there's busyness and there's burnout. And those are different too, just the same as the idea of hurry and busy. And so too often, I think our busyness can lead to burnout because we're not taking that space to rest.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question, but I also know that this is a two-sided question. So we're going to hit both of them at the same time.
Roger that.
Okay.
Can our schedules, our structure of how things happen or how we believe they need to happen be a tool of Satan and become a sin? Or in the same way, God can redeem our busyness too, right? So like, how do we live in that tension of those two things? That this can be a sin that we fall into a trap with, but it can also be redeemed and used for the glory.
Yeah. Here, yeah, I'll take a stab at it. So I thought I'd sing about it.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it for sure can be if we use it as a distraction. So it is true that 100% of our time every day is taken up. Like it is all full, 100% of it. Even if that time is spent sitting and staring off and doing nothing, that is intentional time that you took to do that thing. And I guess nod back to Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. It talks about how, like, if you're saying that your life is too busy for you to interact with God, then then you don't have that relationship, if that makes sense. Then you aren't like spiritually using your life, if that makes any sense. So, like if I say I have too many things going on and so I can't set aside time to like really intentionally interact with the Lord, then I'm not interacting with God in a way that is healthy and spiritually beneficial, which will then again lead to this burnout situation. If I'm not finding rest in Him, like yes, the Sabbath, but also like continuously going back to that place of rest throughout the day. And so, I mean, I'm guilty of doing this, of just using busyness as a way to not sit and think about things and not dive into what's going on in my life because I don't want to, and that's not fun, and that doesn't feel good all the time. So it's like, hey, what are you guys doing later? Movie? And then after that, like, ice cream? Like even if it's small things, making sure I always have something in efforts to not have to sit by myself or sit with the Lord and like wrestle with things. So I definitely think it can be used for that. I think that it can be used on the flip side in a beneficial way.
Yeah.
So
I'm in a different life stage than the two of y'all on that. I've got young kids, and so I was telling somebody the other day, like we just got into the time where my two oldest, Andrew and Ellie, are now both playing sports, but they're on different teams with different schedules, and so we're doing the. Ellie has to be at something at 5:30, and then Andrew has to be at something at 6:30, and we have a 3-year-old who can't be up and at all of these things, or we don't want her to be, right? It's not that she can't. We choose not. We want her to sleep, it turns out. Like all those kinds of things. And so we're doing the whole, like, can you get here? And then how do you get there? And it's I've always seen other people do that and went like, wow, that level of busyness is probably really challenging. And we're living it right now. And it is challenging. And so, like, but at the same time, and this kind of goes, I think, to some of the things that you've been asking, like, that's not wrong, that's not a wrong kind of busyness. I think that what we fall into is something you alluded to there, which is like the escapism side of it. The whole, like, we all have the same amount of time, literally, in every given week. Doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or, the poorest of the poor or whatever. We all have the same amount of time. And we all have more control over our schedules than we feel like we do. And we all can choose to order those things in a certain way. And so, like, the thing about the busyness of the Johnson family schedule right now is we are embracing it, but we have put limits on it. We are not going to, miss Sunday mornings. We're not going to, and we will just go like, yeah, you're not going to make that game. You're just not going to be able to make that game, even though it's a team sport, even though there's commitment and there's, blah, 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 blah. All those things that every one of us that played team sports got told about, commitment to your team, blah, blah, blah. All of that, but there's limits, and the limits are based off of ordering our lives around the things that we need and the things that are good. Rather than letting it just kind of snatch you into this. For me, the temptation is idolatry of the idolizing of my children. This, in order to give my kids this kind of life, I am going to put them in a place where it robs them and us, my family, of the things that we actually need. And like that's a real challenge where the busyness portion of that is something we've embraced, but there are limits to that because we're not willing to let that busyness rob us of the truly good things that are offered to us as well.
I want to head there next, is this idea of how do we limit? How do we decide what's worth it and what's not? Because let's be honest, right now, we are going into this season of extreme busyness, right? Everybody has a Christmas party. Everybody has a holiday event or something for us to go to, some gathering that we feel like we've got to be at. And they're all good things. None of them are in their nature bad. But sometimes when we have all good things, we think that means we have to go. And it's not true. There is a way for us to be able to manage and trim the fat, so to speak, on some of these things that just wear us down. So how do you figure out those limits that you were talking about in the Johnson family schedule? Or in the daily thing of like, okay, I'm using this to escape. How do I pull myself out of those moments and say, okay, this is where I need to manage this better?
First of all, I'm a little offended. I feel like the two of you are getting invited to a lot more things than I'm getting invited to.
I don't think that's true.
Parties,
we
and
know
ice
how hard it was to schedule you for this podcast.
Well, I'm just so busy.
Well, also, you have children, right?
All of those
and
true.
I'm like,
Roxy's like, I don't want your kids. I don't want your life.
No, just me and all my friends were like, wouldn't it be fun if like this friend group did a Secret Santa and this one and this one?
Oh, the days. Okay, sorry. How do we
managing the schedule and prioritizing, I think, is essentially what we're talking about.
For me, I guess how this works out in my life right now, which will have to continue into the busy seasons, because if I'm not doing it now, I definitely won't do it then.
There you go.
I don't like to be home, straight up. I don't like to be in my house. But recently, I've started using. This is a small example. I use Every Plate. So this is an ad for Every Plate. If you could use the code
This is not an ad for Every Plate. Let me make this
22.
very clear.
I literally thought you just meant that you used every plate before you washed one or something. I had no idea what we were talking about.
I have to use Every Plate every week.
I was I don't know how that has anything to do with busyness or hurry. It's like that sounds like an obsessive compulsive thing.
No.
I don't.
the meal subscription.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yes,
Yep.
they give you all the things that you'll need to make this meal,
back.
but you still get to cook it and all that kind of stuff. I purchase those every week, but that makes me be at home to cook at least 3 meals a night and spend time at home.
A night? A week?
A week.
Okay, there we go.
No,
Yeah.
I just love food.
3 meals a night.
And I want to
I eat
use
3 dinners.
every plate.
Yeah,
She wants to
single
recommend
plate.
a diet that goes along with every plate, and it's 3 meals every night.
It'd be a fancy meal every night at Roxy's.
Apps, main, dessert.
There we go.
Gosh, come on,
Logic.
guys. Everyone doesn't eat like that? Wow.
2,000 calories each.
Anyways, we're eating dinner every week. 3
Yes,
times a
I
month.
make sure I have things set into my life that it's like I am going to do this and I am going to be in this space, if that makes sense. I think it just does take a lot of discipline because anyone could text me and be like, cook out? And I'm like, yeah, we're going to do that. But that would further continue me like going and doing something else. And then I'm not resting because to like stop and cook a meal by myself and to like have a moment and like eat food. And then like I typically read after I do that. Doing those things helps me a lot to like slow down, if that makes sense. And so even in busy seasons, like for me to continue to do that is really helpful because it energizes me to go do the other things so that I'm not like halfway everywhere, if that makes sense. I like want to be wherever I'm at, be 100% there. And if I'm not able to do that, I feel like that's not like fair to the people who've intentionally invited me into a space. And so taking time to rest on the back end of it is a kindness to the people that you're around.
That's good.
Yeah. So I've had to be really extreme about this, and so I don't even know. I don't know how much I recommend what I'm doing, as much as I would say like you have to. I think there's an acknowledgement of how hard our culture is fighting against your presence with people.
That's good.
Like it is. I mean, you know, I don't. It's not a. I don't think it's like a conspiracy thing. I think it's just a logic thing that we don't think about. That like the temptation to escape into things is because all the things we escape into are built to hold us for as long as possible. They're designed to do it.
And they're with the veil that like this is about connection.
They have, yes, and it's empty calories, right? It's the whole like anybody that's ever done the whole diet thing and talked about it. It's like the there's like good stuff. There's like good fats and bad fats and good, you know, whatever.
It's 3 meals.
It's 3 meals of empty calories followed by a salad.
Yeah.
No, there's like, it's just, these are what these things are designed to do. Video games, social media, you know, the Netflix, all of it, like the auto scroll, the auto playing, like all of it. It's what it's designed to do because they get the most out of you spending the most time on their products. That's what the whole thing is about. So I've taken extreme steps. I deleted my social media like 3 or 4 years ago, and my family practices a Sabbath together on Saturday, every Saturday, no exceptions. Like, you know, Lauren doesn't do her side gig. We don't clean. We don't do dishes. Like we do all of that Friday before we start. We have like a work hard. We delight in the Lord and in each other, and we are present to one another. We watch movies together and play together and go out to meals together. And then Sunday is like a lot of work again. And so the kids don't really love Sunday afternoon, but they love Saturday. And all of these things are basically, it comes down to what Roxy said, which is like all of us, even someone like me who is like a confessed, I want people to acknowledge how important I am. And the easiest way is not to describe all the things that I do. The easiest way to get the fix of recognition of how important someone is just to go like, busyness. Like if you're really busy, you must be very important. And there's the other side of it, which is almost like this weird, untrusting thing where somebody looks at you and you go, hey, how are you doing? And they're like, fine, how are you? And you're like, I'm good, but no, how are you really doing? And it's almost like, how do you have the time to, you know, like I don't want to enter into this. I got to be somewhere. Like, what's happening right now? There's a thing where, on the one hand, we love people who are present with us. There's a thing about that every time you find yourself sitting across from somebody who's like, no, I am here for this.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be anywhere else. I don't want to be doing anything else. I'm not going to phone check you. I'm not going to watch check you. Like, it doesn't even matter if the thing that like was in front of me to do is now put aside. And there's a thing about that we all go, oh, it feels so good. But the path to be that person is one of like real discipline and a real desire to say, I want that. And that doesn't just involve being willing to set aside things for people. It, from our perspective, it involves being willing to put things aside so that you can know and be known by God, which in turn empowers us to let us be the kind of people that are willing to know and be known to other people. But all of that is like a choice, and there has to be acknowledgement of the fact that that choice is no longer easy. I don't think it was ever easy. So that's probably wrong. It was never easy, but there's definitely like a new factor in the game that has never existed before, which is the ability to be distracted all the time, everywhere you are, anytime you want it. And it really works. It literally, there's a chemical reaction in your brain that like you can't not enjoy it. Yeah. It's a real bummer. I wish I just couldn't enjoy it. That would be helpful. But there's a reality that where you have to choose that. You have to fight for that in a way that I'm not sure that has always been the case in this particular context.
In a practical sense, Marcus, you said you guys take your Sabbath really seriously. So if somebody says, hey, I got this thing on Saturday, we'd love for you guys to come and be a part of it.
Look, I'll confess something, because this is something I really struggle with. So lay the judgment upon me, please. But like things that come up on Saturday that even our church invites people to like participate in, we just don't participate in. And like you'll see me on a Tuesday night and a Wednesday night and a Sunday night, and you'll see me all over the place in our church. You won't see me on Saturdays because it's work for me. That's it is. And so we don't do those things. It's going to be very rare for you to see me on a Saturday unless it's a super big thing like the culture conference that we did recently, which was really awesome. But we changed that. So Friday became the Sabbath, and we reorged our entire week around like canceling things, moving things, so that could be the case in that particular instance.
Do you find people disappointed when you say, hey, this is something we take serious and we're not doing that?
So I find two versions of it. On the one hand, I find people that are disappointed. On the other, yes, there are some people that are disappointed, and all I can do is basically go like, all I can say is that I'm of the opinion that all of us should be making sure that we're doing this in some form. And just because this thing is something that you think I ought to be doing, I might, I get that, but I also think that, if you're not doing a version of this, then there's a potential lack of health there, right? Fundamentally, the whole concept of Sabbath is to force yourself to trust to the Lord things that you feel like are your responsibility. Like that's kind of the whole. But the other thing I experience is that when you describe the Sabbath and you go the whole day, you put your electronics down, like you don't pick up a phone, you're just laughing and playing and getting together with other people and sharing meals, and like the day is based off of delight and rest. You just put it all aside and go, not today. You pick that back up tomorrow, not today. And everybody goes, that sounds amazing. And then they think to themselves, but is that something that I could do? I can't do that. My kids play soccer on Saturdays. And it's like, oh yeah, it turns out you have to there is self-denial in this, and there's disappointing people in this, and that's part of it. That's part of it.
That's good though, because I do think that there is a lot of us who we make rules that aren't really rules, and we operate in them. But it's also people like us who will say yes to everything, who make this hard for people like you who try to honor the Sabbath, because we're like, I'll do it, sure, why not? I'm in. One thing I think we have to talk about in this episode is that it is rest is honoring. The Lord talks about it a lot in Scripture. I mean, we talk about it when we see creation. We talk about it when we see Jesus' example in his ministry in life. And then we talk about it even in the stories we read about. I mean, Martha and Mary and all of that, and just what is the benefit of busyness. So what do you think are some takeaways, some important things for people? How do we place the same value on rest and on a kind of creating space in our life like the Bible tells us to? How do we practically do that?
I think the first thing that I'd really recommend is connecting that the call to rest is loving. There are multiple scriptures throughout like the Bible that talk about the fact that one of the things that we're literally looking forward to is rest. You know, I mean, like, our labors will cease, and it's there's the difference of like not necessarily. It's not the whole picture of sitting around on clouds like playing harps, because the Bible doesn't talk about the like we will have responsibilities, but the labor part of that is gone. It becomes a joyful experience, and it certainly is not a hurried experience that's talked about. And so, the call to rest is a loving call. It's a big part of it. And another thing that I think is really important is connecting. I mean, this is a whole other like rabbit trail that I'll just briefly touch upon, but you can directly connect an increase in mental health issues, in dissatisfaction with our lives, and like the drop in happiness rates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can trace that line to the busyness level of our culture. And like this is an act of resistance that by definition means it's hard, but it's like a resistance against things that are actually bad for you. And no one's making an argument to the opposite. There is no argument for the benefit of social media. Literally. I've never seen it. I've never seen a study that actually shows like the great benefits of constant connection into things like that, because it currently doesn't exist because it was not designed to benefit you. It was designed to hold your attention. And there's things along those lines where like there is an aspect of the thing that started it for me is placing an importance on this that isn't just like, well, this is just one of those things that, you know, I probably should rest and, you know, pray and like all this. It's like, no. This is a call to an act of resistance that is one that is literally for my benefit. And if followers of Jesus just blending into the culture is not actually the picture that's drawn for us either. We are supposed to stand out as unique from our culture.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, as the guy that should probably bring up scripture at some point today, I have a Bible in front of me just to remind me to do that.
Insert prop.
Deuteronomy, like literally the justification for Sabbath in Deuteronomy is an act of resistance. You are no longer slaves. Like show Egypt and the cultures around you that you can stop and rest. Like that you aren't forced to work, both by cultural demands or literally by enslavers. Like you are free, and this is a sign, this is an act that we are a unique nation distinct from the world. Like that kind of resistance was built into it from the beginning. And so like a big part of it is identifying like the worth of it, and that there is a part of it that's not just like, hey, everyone agrees, like, you know, 8 hours of sleep a night is probably the best way. It's not that. It's not that. It's like this is a soul, like full wellness kind of thing. That identifying that is one of the biggest things that someone can do to get to a place of choosing the hard path of something like this.
One of the things that I think is important too is like rest and doing nothing are different. Because I think for myself, if I truly examine myself, I'm realizing, because of COVID, bless it, I am much more introverted than I thought I was. Because during COVID, I was like, I don't have to go to this. This is awesome. I can sit at home and do whatever I want. And I realized that is what kind of helps me regain the energy I need to go back out and be whatever I am. And so what's interesting is when I think about this concept of rest, for me, a lot of times it it isn't me choosing to sit and watch Netflix mindlessly for hours or choosing to do nothing and whatever fills my bucket. It is me choosing to reconnect with the Lord. That is the only thing that is going to bring my soul the rest that I need. It is not these mindless things that occupy the space and distract me, like you were saying, Roxy, about that idea of I just need my mind to not be constantly running. I need to give it a break and let me fill it with something senseless, like The Bachelor, for that fulfillment for me. It's the rest and doing nothing are different, and that doing nothing can lead to the slothness that becomes also lazy and selfless or selfish, all of those things. How do we find true rest? What do you guys think, or what do you do that helps you get to that place of, okay, I feel rested, I feel fulfilled now?
Yeah. I think, one, it's important to note that this is completely different for everybody, because what makes me feel at ease and at rest is different from Marcus and different from you. Whereas, like, example, I'm an extreme extrovert. And so when I first came to the idea of, like, I need time to set aside and rest, it sounded so boring, and I didn't want to do it. That did not sound fun. What I thought, I can't just sit at home alone all day. That I don't want to do that. And so for me, rest, I do spend time at home, and I have to at first force myself to do that.
Yeah.
Until you find the benefit of, sitting alone with the Lord. And then you kind of crave some of those moments. But then I also have to, like, I'll go for a walk or go for a drive. I really love to drive around. It's one of my favorite things to do. And so just to drive around by myself in downtown or out to Tybee and just be in the car by myself is restful.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
Do you find, as an extrovert, some of your rest comes from being in intentional conversations like we were talking about earlier?
100%. To be alone naturally drains me, which in some ways can be beneficial because it will empty me of myself, and so I can intentionally meet with the Lord in that space. And so the thing that is my weakness, like Scripture would tell us, is bringing Him glory in that way. But to just dwell with other people gives me so much life. And that could even just be sitting in the same room as somebody, in a small way, but having deep, intentional conversations with people that also are just like, "Hey, how are you?" Like, But in those days where I'm choosing to have rest, I don't plan that. I intentionally don't say, "Hey, on this day, let's go get coffee." If I'm by myself and resting, and I decide to go get coffee, and someone comes to mind to reach out to, then I'll reach out to them and say, "Hey, I'm heading this way. If you want to come, that's cool." But I have to intentionally not make a plan to do that, because then I'll fall into like, I'll plan all these other things that are good for me too. And then we're right back to being busy and not restful. So I think it looks different for everybody else, but I can't be in one spot for too long. And I know that about myself. So there's a lot of ways that you can connect and rest and do all those things that don't involve sitting in a silent room.
Right.
So.
Which I think is an important distinction. It doesn't just mean cancel everything on your calendar and do that.
Which for some people could be restful. And if that's restful for you,
I'd put roots down in one place if I could.
That stresses me out.
So a Sabbath originally is it's a communal command. Like, it wasn't made to individuals; it was made to a community. And most people, I say Saturday because I'm a pastor, and so Sunday is literally part of my job. It is not. It's joyful. I love what I do, but it's not restful. And so for me, it's Saturday because I have to separate it from church. But for most people, as followers of Jesus in particular, who are listening to this, like, the communal aspect of worshiping together is meant to be part of the Sabbath experience. So it's not meant to be necessarily, when we say rest, we don't necessarily mean like, literally try to sleep as much as you can or be alone as much as possible. It will be different for different people, but it absolutely is a communal thing. My Sabbath experience is almost entirely communal because, and if you look at what I'm doing on a Sabbath, like I'm it turns out you still have to like feed and water your children, right? And so
we're not doing watering. Good luck, guys.
I mean, so like we're still parenting. So this isn't like a go crazy, even though I'm the guy that got rid of my social media and all that, right? Like this isn't necessarily meant to be like go be crazy. You have to figure out your context. There are people that work multiple jobs, and I know that everyone's experience is different. The concept of this is, but it's also worth like fighting for, because none of us, if we stop for long enough to think about it, would say that many of the activities we engage in, whose purposes we feel like we just need a break, actually end with us going like, I feel ready to get back in the game.
Yeah.
It doesn't usually feel that way. And so like because these are empty rest calories. But I think we've banged that drum enough.
Yeah. One of the things I want to leave us with is this idea of how do we hold ourselves accountable? Because like we talked about, our schedules are about to get hectic. We ourselves are about to walk into a season of the journey, of Christmas, of Christmas Eve, all of those things. But it can be really easy to just fall back into habit, hear this conversation, say, yeah, that's all true. I need to do that. How do we practically walk into this? What is some real takeaways people could go home and maybe say, okay, I'm going to start here? And I think one thing that has been really helpful for me that I've discovered, I think it's Carrie Nieuwhof who taught this, but it's the idea of kind of categorizing your day of where your energy lies. And for me, it's been really helpful because I do notice that when I am not emotionally in it, that it can be really hard for me, and that's when I'm drained the most. And so figuring out a space in my days where I can say, okay, this is where I have the most relational energy, and kind of categorizing those conversations, those meetings, those things in that space. And then recognizing, okay, this is where I am just depleted and I am good for nothing, and saving very mindless things for that part of my day. I can do my dishes. I can do my laundry in that space because they aren't going to be mad at me if they're like, Blair, you did not have a smile on when you were doing that. You know what I mean? Like that is something that has helped me feel like, okay, I can manage my calendar or my day in these blocks of time, thinking through where do I have the space, or knowing I've got this big thing I got to keep my energy for at the end, so I'm going to be really intentional in the top of my day. Are there any things for you guys that you feel like, hey, these could be really helpful, whether that's having somebody who holds you accountable to how full you're making your schedule, how you maybe are, how are you goal planning, or are you setting an actual plan like you're talking about? I mean, are there some of those things that people can walk away today and say, okay, as I look at the month ahead, here's what I'm going to think about?
I think it all starts with one, you have to know thyself, and know what you're capable of and what margin you need. Because we're all different in our amount of like capacity for certain things. Two, there's a quote from one of my
she got tight.
When I was in middle school, I had a coach, and he would always say, if you want to make something happen, you've got to make something happen. And I use that for a lot of my life.
Wow. Shout out to this coach.
Shout out to Lucky Hayes.
Wow, his name was Lucky?
Let's go, Coach Lucky.
Yeah.
Wow.
Coach Hayes.
Oh, y'all didn't call him Coach Lucky?
I know. I was like, you really missed an opportunity here.
Actually, we call him Coach Hayes or just Mr. Lucky, which is, I feel like, is a cool name. Okay. Mr. Lucky. So for me, like if I said, hey, I want to have more rest in my life, I had to then intentionally create rest in my life, or create space for that. It won't fall into your lap, or happen on accident, or naturally. That's not our natural bend necessarily.
Yep.
So a very small practical thing, I live and die by the Google Calendar. And I make sure I have to like calendar off space of I'm not doing anything, like I'm intentionally resting in this time. But I had to schedule it so that I don't miss it and I can't schedule anything over it. And that's something I had to mentally do for myself because I am an over-yeser. And I will immediately be like, yeah, I'm not doing anything. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
And so I have to do that. And even in ways of, say I'm in a meeting with somebody a team that I really love, and I know I'm going to talk with them for a long time. I'll like extend that time to be like, I'm going to be here an hour later, actually. So that one, that aspect of hurried doesn't creep back in. And I can dwell with people if I need to. So I think for me, it comes out with like being very intentional with my time and how I spend it. And that may be paper for some people. For me, it's digital, and I have to do that. And I wish I didn't have to, but I have to.
I think that so there's the know thyself. I think there's an education side of it that people can choose immediately to just go like. Ruthless Elimination of Hurry is a great book. Watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix and just like educate yourself on some things. And because all it does is it just turns a mirror to what we all already know.
Yeah.
Which is that many of the behaviors we are engaging in right now that theoretically are us taking breaks because we're tired of what we're doing is not actually helping us.
Yeah.
And many of us know that already, but sometimes it can be helpful to have someone really lay it out in a way that makes you connect some dots. You have the dots, but you don't necessarily have the connections. And so books like Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which is an easy read, by the way. Like it's and it's brightly colored, and so it's built for us. It's built for we millennials.
It's built for our
Bright
distracted
orange,
brains.
actually.
Yeah, that's right. It's built for us, and in Social Dilemma, things like that are just like kind of eye opening. I think that makes a big difference because it helps you go, okay, so now like if I'm doing things, it's like what was the Super Size Me? Isn't that the documentary where the guy ate nothing but McDonald's for a month?
Yes.
And it's just one of those things where like things like that work. Like they really do help you kind of go like, whoa, all right, now I need to consider what would this actually look like. I would 100% go for me. I'm like dive in, man, because if you think to yourself that like making like dessert together as a family and playing together and putting your phones down and literally the whole day dedicated to delighting in the blessings of your life and the Lord Himself sounds great. It is hard, but it's not as difficult as we would immediately tell ourselves that we can do. And I just am going, if that sounds good to you, try it. But of course, the big thing is just a basic, fundamental. I know we've talked a lot about Sabbath, but a starting point would be to start your day. Is probably the easiest way to do it. Is to start your day. Pray a psalm. There's tons of materials that help you figure out how to do that. Read some scripture. Don't pick up your phone until you've spent time with Jesus. Like literally, it could be a 15-minute commitment in the morning, but it can reset some things. And as you find the joy and the rest and that kind of stuff, it's something that can kind of start to build a hunger for something that might make you make choices that even have been mentioned in this podcast that you'd go like, whoa.
That seems extreme, Marcus.
Yeah. It's like, yeah.
Okay, but we haven't asked this, and it's just a quick yes or no. Was the Sabbath afterwards, is it worth it?
100%.
Okay.
100%. And by the way,
really
if
say
like
no.
100, well, no, it's 100%. Our family Sabbath is the spiritual discipline that I have. The moment that we started it became something where it was like, oh, we're never stopping this. And I've struggled with scripture reading and prayer and holding a lot of these like silence and solitude and like fasting, simplicity. There's not a billion. They're all very reachable experiences, spiritual disciplines. But like this is one where that once we tasted it, we never wanted to stop. And it's also been one of the easiest things to like, again, whole other topic. Sometimes it's hard to show how your life actually stands unique from the lives of the people around you, even though you're a follower of Jesus. Hey, tell somebody, describe when you go to Starbucks on a Saturday when you're Sabbathing as a family and all the kids are like, you get whatever you want. And the guys are like, oh yeah, what are you doing? Just nice small talk from behind the counter. And you start describing what you're doing, and people are going to be like, whoa. And then this is what we're doing. We're delighting in each other and in God, which we want to do every Saturday. No work. We're just resting and delighting. That's what we're doing all day long. And people were like, whoa, that sounds awesome. And it's like, yeah,
I'm like, whoa, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
it is awesome. It is awesome.
Yeah, I think it also helps with, I think it's true for a lot of us, but often we tie what we're able to produce and do to our worth and who we are. And so it's a beautiful reminder that even when I'm doing nothing, like the Lord comes and dwells with me and delights in me.
Yes, amen.
And so I don't have to work this day. Like I get to just be with him, and he loves me no less and no more than he did those other days.
So good.
So yeah, it's
So
a really
good,
great reminder
Roxi.
that comes with rest.
Well, on that mic drop, we're just going to leave it. So good.
End it there.
Thank you guys so much. So many practical takeaway tools. And we hope that you guys will be really intentional in your time. I know I'm going to think about it.
Blair, you and I can hold each other accountable to further
we
move
go.
into rest.
I was about to say it can be a communal thing.
No, I think I probably rest too
y'all,
much.
come on, come hang out with the Johnsons. My
I'm
kids are a
coming to
delight.
Sabbath. Wait, are we allowed into your Sabbath or no?
Yeah, we
Okay.
already have.
Yeah,
we
it's communal, Blair.
we've actually
I'm
entered
coming
into
to
a very
Starbucks.
intentional community over this very thing with another
You said
family.
the kids get
and
whatever
we're
they
happy
want.
to enjoy
Right.
it.
So
Yep.
do we get whatever we want?
I don't think that counts to us. But
Dang.
I commit to buying your Starbucks if you come Sabbath with us on Saturday. Everyone that's no, I'm just kidding. All right.
everyone that's listening, you're invited to the Johnson Sabbath.
No, rescinded.
I'll cut that part.
Cut it.
Well, thanks for listening to Good Question and for bringing your questions with love and curiosity in your heart. We are so grateful that you joined us and would love for you to rate and subscribe to the podcast. That way we can have your feedback and adjust as we need to. Also, if you have a question you want us to tackle here at the table, we'd love to hear about it. You can send it to online@compassionchristian.com. We'd love to be able to talk about maybe what you're thinking through. Next time we are together, we have a special episode. We're doing Christmas, and we're talking about it with our senior pastor, Kim Huxford. We'll talk about some of his traditions and some of the things you should keep in mind this Christmas season. We look forward to seeing you next time and navigating faith one good question at a time.